Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Digestible Podcast, where we give you all the health and wellness information that you need in an amount of time that your busy day can handle, and we make it easily digestible. I'm your host, Staci Seed, along with my sister, Melissa Hauptman, and today we are bringing you Pete Bahe from Iron and Acre. So a couple of things here. First of all, have you ever considered when you're in the grocery store and you pick up a package of chicken? When was that chicken last on the farm? How long did it take for it to get from wherever it was living and growing to being processed to actually getting into your hands? And does that matter? So those are some questions we're going to discuss today. And also a fun little story. So Pete is my neighbor. And when Missy and I were starting the podcast, he was starting Iron and Acre. Unbeknownst to either one of us, our first episode came out with Mary Purdy on from the Nutrient Density Alliance, talking about regenerative farming and why we need it to get our nutrients. He was starting this really cool business. And our first episode came out and he was texting me and finding me and being like, we have to talk. We're doing the same thing. We're talking about the same things. So this is really very full circle and really fun to have him here. And as an extra bonus, if you are in the Chicagoland area, he is offering our listeners a discount. The code is digestible and you'll get $25 off your order. And sorry to you out-of-towners, he cannot deliver it to you.
Yeah, for the Ann Arborites listening and anyone outside the Chicago area. But we're so excited to have him because what Pete is doing is sort of a growing trend in the market, which is sourcing food more locally and knowing where your food is coming from. And that's why we're so excited to share our interview with Pete today. So Pete Bahe is a former technology executive who grew up in northern Wisconsin, where his after-school routine often meant milking cows instead of staring at screens. And that early connection to real food came full circle when he founded Iron and Acre, a North Shore-based delivery service partnering with local farms to bring pasture-raised meats and farm-fresh staples straight to families' doors. And Staci's door. Right,
yes,
Stace?
And we love what he brings us, and we love the farms that he's working with and the farmers he's working with. And this is actually part one of a two-part series, and in the next one we're going to meet one of the farmers.
Yep, and we're excited to share this, so enjoy this episode.
Hi, Pete. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Hi, guys.
We're excited to have you here. So why don't you tell us what inspired you to start a delivery service focused specifically on regenerative and humanely raised products?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it didn't start out as what it is now, I think, with most ventures, right? There's pivots and changes along the way. It started with kind of a winter break trip that I took with my family. We rented a lake house in kind of rural Michigan. And one day we drove past a farm that had a big sign that said beef for sale. And I'll take just a quick detour. I milk cows growing up. I'm from a very rural town in Wisconsin. A lot of my friends are farmers. So I've been around farms my whole life, aware of, kind of how that works. But a lot of them are conventional farms. So, that was a more traditional sense in the Midwest, certainly. And so we drove past this house that had a big sign that said beef for sale. And so I said to Staci, I'm like, my wife is also named Staci. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm going to come back here. So, a few days went by and I went back by myself and I talked to the farmer, and she really started to kind of get into the nitty gritty of what they were doing from a farming perspective. And how, obviously they raise the best beef and, they're a bit biased. But I bought a ton of beef that day, and we came home and I ate that beef and I gave it to my friends and family. It was some of the best beef we've ever had. And, we're farmers market people. And during the conversation, she said something that kind of stuck with me, and then, with Staci as well, which was, she can grow all of this. She can raise these cattle all day long. She doesn't know how to sell them. She can't get rid of the beef aside from, her friends and family. If she takes it to processing plants or she takes them to auction, she gets pennies on the dollar. And that started turning the gears for me. It's like, all right, well, I've been in sales my whole life. I've been in technology from a corporate perspective my whole life. I think there's a lot that we could do to kind of partner with these farms to start to bring this stuff. And that's where it started. Just a little rural trip in Michigan.
Yeah, and the way I understand it is a lot of the smaller farms, which is not how most people do it anymore because of the large conventional and industrial farms, is that the quality's back on these smaller farms. They grass feed their beef. They're out in the pasture. Same with the chickens. They'll raise organically. But because our system of distribution across the country is set up for these larger farms, you meet people like the woman you met. And so I love that you've come up with this solution, which I think a lot of people are doing in small pockets throughout the country, because they're noticing that there's this supply chain gap is keeping really good quality food from people, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really well said. And I think there's a lot of different kind of facets to this, and we uncover them all the time. But, when you think about something like regenerative farming, right? Regenerative farming was kind of, it was like poo-poo for a long time, right? For a lot of these farms, because they didn't believe that it would work. But if in most things, if you just come back to the most natural state of something, that's typically its best state. So working with, cover cropping and, no tillage and things like that, you actually get better yields, right? Especially when you start to mix in animals. The whole entire ecosystem becomes this symbiotic element where the yields are better, the prices can be raised because you have, you have this like pure supply chain that you can bring to people. And so we started to go out and look for farms that were specific to this, right? We wanted folks that were kind of stewards of the land, that were thinking about this from a long-term perspective, not just a transactional perspective of just trying to get something out the door. And those folks obviously exist, and, to each their own. But we wanted people that were taking a really long-term view of the land, trying to ensure that, farming exists for the next generation, and, raising animals properly, ensuring that they're not getting antibiotics, ensuring that, they have access to free reign, the way that they were intended to. So that stuff became really important, and that became the journey that we went on, starting to meet farmers and going through that process that we went through.
So how do you and your company, Iron and Acre, how do you find the farmers, and how do you choose between them?
Yeah. So there's a number of different things, and I can share this with you guys after the show, but we have kind of a checklist that we go through on our side. It very early on. It basically started with just going out and visiting these folks, right? Listening to them, having an understanding of how they raise their animals, how they care. And, candidly, in the beginning, a lot of this was really, aside from going through a checklist, a lot of it's vibe check, right? Life's really too short to work with people you don't like and people that treat you poorly. And, and there's a fair amount of folks that I didn't want to work with. So we would go out, we'd meet the farmers, we'd meet their families, we'd spend the day on the farm, we'd bring home food from them, we would try the food, we would share the food. That was one of the nice things about being our neighbor. Staci is our neighbor. There's always food here that's being tried and sampled and pushed around before we bring it out to market. But so there's a number of things that we look at, right? One is ideally, we have some sort of family-owned farm, right? We're obviously very big into the family piece of this, but there's really something magical that happens when you start to get the children and the husband and wife involved, and it becomes this really kind of familial element. And I don't know, you could scientifically, there's probably nothing there, but I feel like I can taste the difference when there's a little bit of love and magic in the air there. It's a bit esoteric, but the other piece of this is when we go out and we look at the farms. We're obviously looking for those regenerative practices. We're looking for cover cropping. We're looking for no tillage. We're looking for animal diversity. We're also looking for crop diversity as well, right? We're not buying anything from folks that are monocropping, rotational grazing in the pastures, basically where we get our eggs outside of Milwaukee at a company called Three Brothers Farm. They're, I think, a fourth generation farm family. They grow sheep, raise sheep rather. They have cattle, they have chickens, and you go out there and all these animals are just coexisting in kind of this, beautiful symbiotic environment, and they rotate them, so you have the cows kind of lead the way, and then you have the sheep that come behind, and then you have the chickens that come behind that, and all of these things are worked into the crops, and the end product, is incredible. The eggs that we get from them are wonderful. The family is wonderful. And so it's a lot about that. Not everybody that we use is certified organic. There's a lot of small farms out there that can't afford or won't pay to have the certification. But, we have found that it's not really necessary if you're going through the right practices and you're doing the right things to the soil.
Okay. And maybe for our listeners, those types of practices do several things. Feeding the soil, which is not the way conventional works. They pour on chemicals that typically leach the life from the soil. The way Pete's describing it is it feeds the life in the soil, which actually makes the plants that grow in them more nutritious because they have access to more nutrients. It makes the animals healthier because they get diversity and they get fresh air and they can move around and eat the things that they were meant to eat. And then as a result, and there's more and more findings that show this, the food that comes from there not only tastes better, per Pete and many people will testify, but also that they're more nutritious.
100%. One of the things that we really looked into when we started to do this, because there's a reason that this isn't done kind of from a national perspective yet. It's logistically, it's really difficult. It's really hard to do this. In a way that has some urgency to it. And I use the word urgency specifically because if you look at the supply chain of like a typical grocer, right, the produce is grown and, however it's grown, we'll take that out of the equation and just look at the supply chain. The moment that it's grown, it's then put onto a truck, it's packaged up, put onto a truck, brought into a processing plant. And, depending on what the actual crop is, in the processing plant, they're going to have some level of selection, right? They're going to weed out based largely on characteristics visual, right? Because most shoppers are visual. So a lot of it gets wasted right there. But more so, it's going to start to sit there. Right. So you have some conventional processing plants that'll start to add chemicals. They'll start to change the environment in there. They'll change basically the way that the air is structured so that the vegetables will last longer. Some of them will start to get washed. You see the things that are like triple washed in the store, oftentimes washed with like a chlorine solution, just to, obviously make them crisper, brighter, but also last longer on a shelf. So you're now in a processing plant. Then it'll go to a warehouse for distribution. Then it'll get on a truck. Then it'll get to a grocery store. It'll sit at the grocery store. Then it'll be put out when the last of the remaining crop from previous is put out. So the moment you pick a vegetable, you have kind of this countdown, right? You have this ticking clock in terms of nutrient density. Mm-hmm. And you take something like a cruciferous green, like a kale or something like that, pretty high in a number of different vitamins. About 48 hours post-pick, it's cut in half in terms of nutrient density. You go out 72, 96 hours, it degrades to a point where you're not getting nearly what you believe that you're getting, right? Your vitamin C's, K's, A's, also all the antioxidants really degrade rather rapidly. So for us, the thing that we're trying to do, our produce is picked on Tuesday and delivered on Thursday. Right, it's as fast as we can possibly get it from farm to table, as minimally packaged as possible and as minimally processed as possible. Nice. Same with the meat. And that from a grocery store perspective, like it's not possible, right? You can't have. You need things that are shelf stable. You need things that can sit out there while consumers browse and look at them. The other side of this too, from a preservation perspective, if you look at something like cucumbers and apples. Majority of cucumbers and apples that you find in the store have some sort of wax coating in them, right? To keep the moisture, to preserve them on the shelf, mm-hmm. And claimed to be safe by the FDA. And I'm not one to refute that, but I don't want to eat wax, right?
Right.
So there's a lot that goes into it from a supply chain perspective. And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the faster that we can get the food from, basically the ground to our mouth, because this is a living entity. And if you're looking to create, kind of consume all of that, what's the word? Prana, that's the fastest way you can get it.
Right. There's something that feels so good and so fulfilling to go to a farmer's market to get your fresh produce, or to 100%. Have our food and produce delivered by you, Pete, to our house, knowing that it just came from the farm. I can't explain how much more fulfilling it is to eat and feed our family that way than it is to go into a conventional grocery store, which always gives me an icky feeling, and it has for a long time. I do find at Trader Joe's, I do find at Whole Foods. There's a couple ones I do okay at, but most of the big ones, they feel icky to me. And I don't know if it's the fluorescent lights or all the packaged food what, but there's something that's just so gratifying to get fresh food. So how do you educate your customers and people on why they should continue purchasing products from you? And are you noticing a shift in people wanting the fresh food?
We certainly have more and more people, I think, coming to us looking for this, especially now since we're Northern Illinois in the Midwest. The farmers markets have subsided a bit. So we're now getting more and more people reaching out that would have, kind of fulfilled this need a lot at the farmers market. And that's great. Obviously we're running a business here, but as long as people are getting the food from the farmers, that's ultimately the end goal on this. You guys have had conversations with other farmers and kind of talked about, the economic side of this. That's not something we've touched on here, and we maybe touched on it a little bit more, but if you're getting food direct from the farmer as close as possible, the majority of that money stays in their pocket, which feeds a family, right? The moment you start to enter into this commercial supply chain, the farmer gets pennies on the dollar. I think it's 7 cents on the dollar is the average on what a farmer gets in a conventional food system.
It's so insane. Sad.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's insane.
Right.
And that's another reason to feel good about getting your food locally or, from a 100%. Farmer's market or someone like you. Right.
Most farmers have to have second jobs because they can't earn a living for their family off the farm. And so
how sad is that?
That's
it's
very
so
sad.
Upsetting
that's not how it's meant to be.
Because I feel like
right.
our country is built on the backs of farmers, right? We can't all be here without the farmers.
Yeah, we need our food. They give us our food, plain and simple. And so how do you know how much the farmers get if you go directly to the farm then?
If you go direct to the farm, it's somewhere around 86, 87 cents on the dollar. So,
Amazing.
It's genuinely life-changing for them.
Right.
Sure.
And also for us, because we're eating healthier food.
100%.
Can I ask
And you can tell the difference.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah. I have a little side question. So a lot of these farmers that are growing the meat, do they send it off to get butchered and then frozen, and then you get it back from that? Like, how does that work? This is a supply chain question.
So no worries at all. So for example, we work, a lot of our chicken comes from a place called Abundant Pastures, which is in central Illinois, like southern Illinois. But they raise pasture-raised chicken, all the goodness there. It's a family farm. They check all the boxes. They work with basically a processor that's a few miles from their home. It's not It's not a large-scale commercial processor that you would find that would take in, millions of pounds of meat. It's a butcher shop where like Sue and Dick still run it from the 50s, right? So they process that meat. It's flash frozen. So from a processing perspective, basically they're taking out the feathers. They're taking out all the things that people wouldn't want to eat. They are packaging it up as minimally processed as possible. So we use a process called cryovacking versus vacuum sealing because it is more minimally processed at that point. Whereas it doesn't have the same level of deoxygenation, which actually kind of it removes some of the nutrient. It's a modicum of difference, but it is a little bit of a difference. It's also less expensive from a cryovacking perspective, which allows the farmer to keep some of the money, which allows margin to be had here. So there's goodness to be had there, but it's a few miles from their house. And then it's frozen and we pick it up. So it's flash frozen.
Right.
We pick it up and we deliver it.
Okay.
So all of the meat that we deliver has the processing and packaging date on it. So you're eating chicken very often that's a week old or 2 weeks old, whereas in the store it can sit there for 6 months. It can sit there for a year because of the processing that they go through.
Right, it's
gross. Yeah.
Okay.
And I have to say, it makes me feel better because I am more on that animal welfare side too.
For sure.
That the animal doesn't have to travel very far to be processed.
Right.
Because whenever I pass one of those big trucks on the highway filled with livestock, like I want to cry and pull them over and be like, can I buy the animals? It makes me so sad. So the fact that they have a short trip.
Agreed. It is a short trip. And, one of the things to think about that as well, same with beef processing. It comes from a farm that is right down the street from the processor. That trip, a cow's in a cow's life, most of the time, they've never been in a trailer before. It's terrifying,
it's
right?
stressful.
So their cortisol is spiked, right?
So you don't want that. We don't want to eat their cortisol.
Right.
We got enough of our
exactly
own.
Right. So we try to factor in all of those things in terms of the supply chain as well as the end product.
Important.
So those farmers really do think about all of those things, the ones that are doing it the right way. For example, like the beef that is processed, they will bring that animal there a couple of days before it is actually processed so they can reacclimate to the environment before it is actually processed, to basically get the cortisol levels back to reality.
Oh, interesting.
It is something that's really
considered.
Good. Right. And the fact that these animals have had like the proper lifestyle, right? They were loved, they were cared for, they got to do their whatever they were meant to do,
100%.
Right? Be outside and be an animal as opposed to being like trapped
in
a
and
cage.
Be with their calves. Right.
Yeah.
In a conventional farm, the calves are moved right away. Right?
I know. It's heartbreaking.
We don't need to go into that.
Pete, have you noticed shifts in customer awareness and demand for regenerative foods since you started?
Somewhat. I have noticed a shift in demand for farm food. I think the umbrella of farm gets a lot of trust and credit, and may not always be well deserved, right? A lot of conventional farms don't do things the right way. But I think for folks that are looking for farm food, very often they assume that people are doing the right things.
Right.
I think we're trying to do what we can in terms of education. I think you guys do a great job in terms of education. We recommend your podcast to everyone.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, it's the best. But we do a fair amount in terms of trying to educate. At every delivery, we talk about how the animals are brought through. We talk about where the produce comes from. We send out a newsletter that talks about all these things as well. We're starting to put out some webinars and stuff that really kind of get into the nitty gritty around this stuff.
Oh, great.
But I do think that there's a long way to go in terms of just general education. Because when somebody thinks about a farm, they think about, a 6,000 acre farm with giant tractors going through it and large tillage and monocropping and big fields of corn. And your, local regenerative farm looks nothing like that. And I think there's a long way to go in terms of just people kind of creating that level of association.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the more that we do this, the more that you mentioned there's many other folks that do this in pockets throughout the country. I think the more that we can create this kind of hub and spoke type model where we decentralize the supply chain and start to kind of create these connections in local communities with farmers and their constituents, I think we're in a much better place.
Yeah, I agree. I think education's key. I'm so glad you're doing webinars. One of the challenges the bigger food companies have is they'll have these great ideas to do something like regenerative or whatever, and then the idea will go up to like the chief marketing officer, and they do market studies, and they're like, we're sorry, but there's just not a big enough demand.
Right.
So we're not going to invest in this change and this shift if people aren't asking for it. So we need to tell people to ask for it and why they should ask for it. So what you're doing is amazing, and this is part of what we do.
100%. And I think one thing too, I've read some of those market studies, and I think one of the challenges there is a lot of times in the questioning. Like they're built, inherently biased, because one of the, typically a lot of the questioning leads to, would you pay more for something that was regeneratively raised? Right. And most people are barely scraping by as it is.
Yeah.
And to pay more for something that they don't really understand, those things are kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, unfortunately.
Right. And unfortunately, you can't say, you can't restrict marketing to, you can't say healthy and all natural, even if it, isn't healthy and all natural, you can still say those things. So when people pick up two packages and they both say all natural, but one of them really maybe is more natural, you can't distinguish.
Right.
So, sorry, Staci, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I had just two things. Like one, we've had Julia Johnson from Compassionate World Farming on a couple times, and she has
great.
Always, we love her.
Thanks, yeah.
And she's always said, like, if you're going to choose better, healthier option, maybe that means like one night a week you're eating vegetarian, know?
Right.
But to make it affordable, is it better to have meat a little less often and have it be better and healthier and better for our environment, the animal, and our bodies? And I think that's a real decision, but a good thing to think about.
Right.
100%.
And also what you're doing is you're your business is bringing us back to how things were, right? When our grandparents, our great-grandparents were living their lives, you got your milk and your meat from like down the street, right? There was a farm down the road. There was a local farm somewhere, or lots of them.
Right.
And we're so far away from our food. And I think that they were healthier.
Yeah.
So much healthier back then,
right.
eating the way they did with what was available to them.
Right.
And we've just come so far away from that.
Well, you trade convenience, right? And I think that's the
right.
Kind of the silent killer is convenience.
Well, that's why you're helping with that, Pete, because
so much.
You're making it convenient. Right. I mean, delivering it to people's houses, that's amazing.
It's wonderful. So how does that become, like, you're delivering to the north suburbs of Chicago, I assume, is kind of your limit. So what about everybody else? How does this make its way across the country so everyone has access to what you do?
Well, that's the goal. The beginning of the year, we're looking into the suburbs of Milwaukee. So that's kind of our next market. But the idea is to go and, you guys will talk to Marty Travis in a subsequent podcast. And, he has built basically a cooperative of farms. So the goal is really to get to places where they are somewhat underserved, or they have the resources to be able to create something like this and build a cooperative of farms that kind of check all of these boxes, get them working together, and then kind of get a conduit into the consumer side of it, right? So my goal is to create the consumer awareness, educate the consumer, ensure that, we can create the demand, and then on the backside, you create that cooperative of the farms to create that supply chain. But again, the whole thing is that this has to be somewhat of a hub and spoke model across the country. The moment that I start to take chicken from down the street to me to Los Angeles, like it becomes defeatist.
Right. Might as well be the grocery store. Right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So it really has to be decentralized.
So we have a local farm stop in town. It's called Argus Farm Stop, and the owners are basically retired and like financial people that just had a passion for local food, and they made relationships with local farmers, and they rented out space, and then next to it they had a coffee shop. And they actually explained to me, because they want to give their farmers 70 cents on the dollar, but they have to pay rent and they have to pay staff. It's the coffee shop carries the farm stop. So it's not an easy model, if you don't have scale. And so there's got to be creative ways. So people who are doing what you're doing are creative, determined, and maybe a little more financially flexible in the beginning. So I commend you, and I think it's wonderful, but it's so worthwhile. And if we can grow these cooperatives, like you mentioned, so that people can share resources, so costs come down, but you're not losing that local, small farm benefit, I think that would be amazing.
100%. And there's a farm market in Stonebank, which is kind of right down the street from where I get our eggs. And it's kind of a similar model there. The things that bolster that farm market are like a juice shop and a coffee shop, and they have some more esoteric pursuits there as well. But yeah, the margin, the consumer margin on something like this is so slim, because we've been programmed to anchor at prices that are built on these large scale operations, right? And I think to Staci's point too, and if you look at our pricing is really kind of right in line with something like Whole Foods, which, in all fairness does price out some people, and we're working every day to lower that, but you can't lower it from the farm side, right? And that's kind of the key. We can't ever go back to the farmer and be like, oh, you have to take less money. So it always gets cut in the middle. Right. And so the more that we can eradicate the supply chain, we can cut that cost a little bit. But yeah, it certainly is the challenge. And I think to Staci's point earlier around, spend a little bit more on higher quality things, eat them a little bit less often. And I think everybody's kind of benefits along the way.
Or smaller quantities, because we know in this country we have a quantity issue at our meals.
Yes.
But and I wanted to say, I haven't heard of anyone belonging to one in a while, but do you remember when people would belong to the co-op, and they would just get a box of random things?
CSA.
Yeah. They still have those here.
Yeah, and they're not bad. I'm just saying what Pete does at Iron and Acre, and everyone should go, whether you're here or not, should go check out his website to see if you can find something similar in your area if you don't have it. It's so next level because you get to pick. You're getting to pick what you want. It's not like you're just getting what's in your box for the month or the week.
Right.
Yeah.
That it can be challenging, especially for some of us who did not grow up cooking and are trying to figure out how to do stuff. When you get
22 pounds of radishes.
Yes, thank you.
Oh my gosh. I love the ones we got radishes.
I
got watermelon radishes and from Pete a couple weeks ago. And they're
just a couple though.
They're so beautiful.
They're
so spicy. They're such a spicy
100%.
radish.
Oh, interesting.
And so no one else in my family would eat them. So I Googled, you can roast them. I did not know that. I roasted them. They were delicious.
Yeah. You can blanch them too, and that'll take some of the spiciness out of them.
Right.
I like a little spicy, but they were much spicier than a regular radish.
I mean, we can be adventurous, but there has to be weeks where we just go, I know what to do with this, and I don't have to think about it too much. Right.
Yes.
It's twofold, right? I think our focus has always been on the protein side of it, right? We do produce, we do milk and cheese and eggs and all those other things. If you have, I think, good staples in your home, you can always create a meal around that. And that was kind of always our thought process is like, we have, high quality chicken breasts or chicken thighs or ground beef in the home, can always create some sort of meal around that. So we're not just stuck ordering takeout. So that was a big thing for us. And I think to your point, Missy, on the other side of it is one of the challenges that we have come across in terms of just like getting this out to the masses. There's a lot of people that can't cook, if you have higher quality ingredients and you can't taste the difference because you didn't execute on, the cooking side of it, you're not going to do it again.
Right.
Yeah. So that's been an interesting thing as well.
But you know what? Almost anybody can cook ground beef. And that's one of the things that you offer. And we get a lot of ground beef because my boys, who are just learning to really become good cooks, they're very comfortable with the ground beef. And we know it's good quality beef that they're getting. Yeah. And it's something that it's easy for them.
Right. So you make like a 100%. Burrito or tacos or whatever, and you pour in some salsa and you've got a healthy meal, right? You don't cheese from the
they do so many different things with it.
Right. Yeah. Anyway. Awesome. Yeah. So I think some of it's sort of like, give people foods they're familiar with. And every once in a while you challenge them with something new. But
that sure does. Yeah. Thank you so much for spending all this time with us, Pete. We really appreciate it. We love what you're doing. More importantly,
thanks for doing this. Like my wife and I largely communicate through your podcast. We'll send podcast episodes and that and reels on Facebook. We don't really talk to each other anymore. We just do it all technologically. But the way you guys are doing is amazing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Please share us with others.
We do. Every day.
We appreciate it. Okay,
you guys go in our newsletter all the time.
Oh, good. Thank you. If you could give our listeners one action item to go along with this new information that we've discussed today, what would it be?
It's obviously self-serving, but eat local, right? Like go find a farmer's market, go find a farm, just show up on a farm. And that has been my favorite part of this whole entire experience. When I talk to people, they're like, you just show up at farms? They love it. They genuinely, I've not one single time showed up at a random farm and had somebody be overtly rude to me, right? Like I've had people that wouldn't, they didn't have time. But most of the time they're happy and they're excited to talk to people about what they're doing. They will stop everything that they're doing and they will walk you through the farm. Most of them have some sort of product you can buy at that point, whether it's eggs or whether they have processed beef or chicken there. Go to a farm, talk to a farmer, see what the farm is like, get some food. It's a beautiful process, and take your kids if you've got them. I think that's been really a magical thing, watching my kids interact with animals and farms. That's been so fun.
That's great.
I'm going to have to go on a field trip with you, Pete. I'm going to have to ride along. That would be great. Okay, Pete, here on the Digestible Podcast, we like to say, don't panic, just pivot. Is there a small pivot or change you've made in your life that you are proud of that you're willing to share with us today?
Yes, I think we're about like 95% now. We stopped using commercial flour. And our commercial flour and commercial oats were two things that we eradicated on our side. We feel so much better. So we use flour specifically from Janie's Mill, which is, they grow their own wheat. They grow a number of different crops out there. And then it's all stone ground. That's glyphosate free. I know you guys had a number of podcasts around glyphosate. but we feel so much better. And the end product is better once you figure out how to use it. It actually soaks up more liquid, so it takes a bit of a learning curve to get through it. But the end product is better. You feel so much better. And I don't feel as bad giving my kids muffins and cakes and things like that are baked with this type of flour. And a big thing for me was really was oats. I couldn't eat commercial oats anymore. My stomach just didn't agree with them. And so we started buying oats direct from a farm, and they taste completely differently. They have actual flavor. You break them down naturally. It's wild. So those are a couple of things.
Do you get the steel cut or do you get rolled or both? Rolled oats?
I get both. I prefer rolled oats personally, just because I think I've grown up on them. But steel cut has its place as well. But it's really it's a night and day difference. Staci, I'll give you some oats. They're wild.
Actually, I'll trade you some because I have some from the Standard Process Farm. Ooh, so I'll give you some of mine. You give me some of yours, and let's do a taste test.
That was a great episode. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some of their oats. They're fabulous.
That's awesome.
Pete, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, guys. And good luck with your business. I hope it's wildly successful and you can
me too,
do this in Milwaukee.
Getting the food delivered. So I hope it grows like crazy and you're able to provide
you guys.
This across the country for people.
Thank you for listening to the Digestible Podcast with today's special guest, Pete Bahe of Iron and Acre Meats. You can find his website at iron and the word and, A-N-D, acremeats.com. And if you're within the Chicagoland area, the north suburbs, and you're interested in utilizing their delivery service, Digestible listeners can use a discount code, Digestible, and get 25% off your first order. If you like today's podcast, please share us with others. It's the best compliment you can give us. If you have any questions, ideas, or comments, please email us at info@digestiblestrategies.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and remember, don't panic. Just pivot. The content shared on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are not medical professionals, and the views expressed here are not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any health conditions. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making any health-related decisions.